and then we'll get started. Okay, I think we're recording. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Jo Poff. Thank you for joining me tonight. So I'm going to be talking about homeschooling with you guys tonight, and I'm super excited about talking about this with you guys. I just want you guys to know that this is just something I love sharing and talking about. I'm not in it for anything. I just paid to upgrade my Zoom account so I could make sure we could accommodate the amount of people who said they wanted to come or be a part of this class. I just really believe in it very strongly after having been doing it for 15 years. So I just want to share with you guys what I've learned. And I just want to say up front, I am not an expert at this. I think that by the time I'm done graduating all 6 of my children, I still won't be an expert at this. And I do it differently than many other parents who do it. I have my own style. My kids are different than other kids. We'll talk about a lot of that tonight. So I just want to say up front that some of it may resonate with you, some of it may help you, and then you might totally find a completely different path for your homeschooling journey, which is the coolest part about it ever. So what am I doing here? Whoops. Okay. So just a little bit of an intro for those of you who don't know me or much about me. This is my family. This was actually a couple of years ago, so we've had some grow quite a bit since then already. My homeschooling journey started in 2004 with a book. I was reading Dr. James Dobson's book, Bringing Up Boys. Anybody ever read that book before? It's a classic. It's really good. I think I've read it 4 times. So if you have boys, it's a good book. I haven't read it for a few years, but I used to read it every couple years. But that was the first time I had read that book. And there was a part in there where he was talking about how boys aren't really designed to just sit for hours on end. And it started stirring something in me, and God used that to really plant a seed about homeschooling. And at the same time that happened, my second child, who is the tallest one in the picture over there on the left, if that would be the left side of your screen, he was 3, and he was about to be entering preschool. And I had brought him into a small private Christian school to pick up my other son, my oldest son, who was there for music lessons. And when I picked him up, the bell rang, and all of the kids came filing out of the classrooms. And I remember looking at his face, and he was terrified. It scared him so badly. And that kind of made me go, whoa, why would that scare you? You know, and I started thinking about things for him. And then at the same time, we were looking at a potential diagnosis for him of ADHD. And I thought, he probably, all those factors combined, he's not going to do well in a school setting. So it was just really a divine encounter that I had read the book and all of this stuff, and this option of homeschooling had come up. 16 years ago, I didn't have internet really. I didn't really do much of anything like that. So it was really neat to see that there was another option that I knew nobody who did it at the time. So in the last 16 years, we had 3 more kids. We had 3 kids at the time when we first started. We've had 3 more. We've moved across the country a few times. We've homeschooled with no money. We've homeschooled with a good budget for schooling things. We've graduated 2 of our kids, and we have 1 more graduating next year. So one thing I wanted to just give you a background with, and maybe this will start kind of resonating with some of you, is another thing that happened on our journey was my oldest son would come home because he did 3 years of, well, not 3 full. 3 full. He was in 3rd grade when we started homeschooling. And he would come home, you know, kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, and he would just kind of like push off his younger siblings. Like, he did not care one bit about them. He's like, I just want to go play with friends. And I thought, wow, that's kind of tough. And I started noticing how every weekend we would kind of have to reteach values and family values and things. And I thought, this is getting exhausting having to do this every single weekend. So it was just another moment for me where I kind of woke up. And I remember when we first started homeschooling, my internet connection is unstable. That's great. We're out in the country. When we first started homeschooling, my my son had a hard time with it. That transition is hard. And so if you are bringing kids in that have been in the public school or even a private school setting, I just want to tell you up front that there's a transition period, and it could last a year, and it's not easy. It's a different thing for kids who have been in that setting to understand that their parents can be teachers too, and just to accept a new way of learning. And so that transition was a little bit tough, I'll be honest. But also it was just a learning journey. So we had to give ourselves, each other, a lot of grace and kind of just go at it with that. But when I first started homeschooling him, some things really started to open my eyes. So one of those encounters was I walked into the little bookstore that it was a Christian bookstore, and in the back section they had homeschooling books, and that was where I could get them back then. And I remember pulling out a book, and my oldest, he was the smartest kid in all of his classes. In every grade class that he has, he was always ahead of everything, and the teachers would like have him help the other students, and he would be the first to be done on his tests and all of this stuff. So I was like, okay, well, he's in third grade, so maybe we should, so, you know, let's grab the third grade, maybe fourth grade workbooks. And I remember looking at them going, this is way more advanced than he is right now, but that's the grade he's at. I started waking up to the fact that there's this dumbing down principle in public schools. So when these kids are being told like they're doing super great, they may be doing super great at a level 1 or 2 levels below what they're at because of this concept of dumbing down in public school. It's a I started reading books about it. There's one, I think, by John Holt talking about dumbing down in public schools. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, it's a really cool topic to learn about. So anyway, that was one of our situations. Another one was when I started asking him questions, because my oldest son had some pretty difficult encounters in public school in his 3 years. One of them was he got sent to the principal's office, and I think he was even, I don't remember what punishment they gave him or whatever, because he kicked down a door in a bathroom. And it turns out a classmate of his was stuck in the bathroom and couldn't get out. And so my oldest child, who was, you know, like 8 at the time, kicked the door in to try to help him out. And he got punished for that at school. So I was asking questions as we were starting our homeschool journey, and I realized when I would ask him questions when he was in public school, and I would say, like, how was your day? How was this? How was that? He was answering me from a place of knowing that, or thinking that that was normal, that being punished for trying to help out a classmate was normal, that a child treating you badly on the bus was normal, that all of these things were normal. And so I would say, like, was anything wrong today or something? A lot of the times he would say, no, things are fine, because that was normal to him. And so there was this debriefing kind of thing in our first year too, of where we were learning to navigate it, but he was also helping me see some of the experiences he had had in his first 3 years and kind of just going through a process of healing some of those. So that's a heads up on the first year of homeschooling for us. That was our experience. So these are some of the reasons we started homeschooling when we did it. One of my favorites right now is customizing or tailoring the education to each child. And we're going to talk tonight about learning styles, because every child has a different learning style. When I first started homeschooling my kids, I would save the curriculum and I would use it for the next year. And then I started realizing that they all learn differently, and maybe I could tailor their curriculum based on their learning style, and that would help them do better. And that's been really great. The freedom part of homeschooling is really amazing. We've been able to, we could move anywhere we wanted. We both work at home, we homeschool, we were like, we could go anywhere. Where should we go? And it's, you know, day to day too, being able to just adjust our schedule so that we're not encountering the busy things on the weekend and doing this that way. And when there's an ill family member, we bring our kids, and, you know, whatever it is that we can be there of service and those kinds of things. So I like the freedom part of it. We really, of course, love to be able to guide positive and healthy social experiences. We're going to talk about socialization tonight and how it's maybe not what we think about it. strengthening the family bonds. There's some really cool things that I've loved so much to see in my family and how well they play together. And every person who's in the public school sector, whether they have children there or it's a public school teacher, they all just cannot believe the relationships that my children have with each other and how they get along with each other. And I mean, we still have issues. I'm not saying it's an easy job to parent them, but it's been so worth it to see how much it strengthens family bonds. Providing a safe learning environment. Some of the reason you may be here may include situations like what's going on right now with the toxins they're using in schools and things like that, or maybe there's been bullying experiences or curriculum that is really not safe for a child to hear about and things like that. So being able to choose learning resources that align with the family's beliefs. We can thumb through the curriculum ourselves. We can ask other parents. We can find out if it's something that is going to help instruct our child in the way that God directs us to, or if it's something that might be not what we want in their minds. So, and I put strengthen family bonds on there twice. Sorry about that. I guess it's just really important. So what about socialization? All right, so this was a quote that I pulled out of some research that I dug up. They did these studies and they found that children kept home are more mature and better socialized than those who are sent to school. Obviously, that's just a general overstatement. I'm not saying that like it is for every child. So let me just explain to you about some of what the studies show. Before homeschooling was very common, homeschoolers started to get a bad rap. Like in the 80s, it was pretty much almost illegal in some places. In the 90s, they thought homeschoolers were just weird. And so some researchers set out to say, like, okay, are they really weird? Because society just had this thing that you just sit in a building for 8 hours and you're not weird. But if you stay home to be schooled, you're weird. So these researchers set out to investigate. And what they found was actually pretty shocking. So in some of the studies they did, they found out that homeschoolers were less likely to be influenced by peers. So peer pressure was not as much of an issue with homeschoolers, which is something I personally would like for my kids to not have to be influenced by as much. And it wasn't because they didn't have any peers. So they actually looked into that as well. Homeschoolers had equal opportunities with their peers, like church groups, co-ops, music and dance lessons, family get-togethers, school sports. They found that the homeschoolers were participating in just as many things, if not more, than the public school students. And they found that that was because homeschool students or parents were more intentional about their children being around other students in guided settings and things like that. And so what they were noticing was that public school parents tend to just rely on school settings for their child's socialization, whereas the homeschool parents were more intentional about it. Some more research found that, so they tested homeschool and public school children for social development with this thing called the Vineland Adaptive Behavior Scales. And so they're scoring their behavior in many different areas and watching how they interact with each other. The homeschoolers scored higher on communication, daily living skills, socialization, and social maturity. So their conclusion for the study was that children kept home are more mature and better socialized than those who are sent to school. They further said that socialization of children in homeschools is effective without exposure to large groups of children. So I think that was important because we tend to think of socialization as putting kids into large groups of other kids. And they were finding that socialization is actually really, really effective without large groups. Homeschooling parents are imparting positive family socialization, which is not inferior to the public school culture. So they were also finding that the socialization with family was very beneficial to their skills of maturity and relationships and communication and things like that. So if we think about it, healthy socialization actually means learning to interact and communicate with people of all ages. And so when a public school student is spending most of their time around children of their same age, and that's their socialization, a homeschool child is spending most of their time with people of all different ages and learning to socialize with people, children, and adults of all different ages. So when they are out and about, they're able to interact more with all different ages. And so sometimes, you know, you see how the public school, how that kind of creeps into things, and like there's different things. Like when I first started homeschooling, I noticed a lot of people were like, well, how old is your child? And I'm like, you know, at first I thought, yeah, okay, yeah, let's match our kids up of the same age. But then the longer we started homeschooling, the more we saw things that homeschool children don't like segregate themselves based on age when given their natural environment where they will flourish. And so we don't really ask that anymore. It's more like, you know, do our kids jive or not? So they also did a thorough study of behavior by placing homeschool children together and public school children together in group activities. And their behavior was rated by observers. The observers were not told which ones were public school and which ones were homeschool students. The results were striking. The average behavior score for conventionally schooled children, so public school, private school children, was more than 8 times higher than the homeschool children. And so what they found was that they had more behavior things that they would score them on, like arguments and fighting over toys and things like that. They found that the homeschool children tended to play better together, cooperate better in group activities, invite others into their group, you know, like not be cliquey. They were quiet when required and handled losing games better. Obviously not all of them, but that was just the overall score. And for me personally, you know, I take the word of the Bible very seriously when it's talking about how the company we keep, the people we're around, you know, is very important. And so it's nice to be able to guide our children into healthy socialization situations and things like that. I have some people in my life that are in the public school arena, and they're sending me the things that they're getting right now, and some of the things that they're getting right now and that is happening in the public school are really concerning to me. And so for our family values, and that's another reason why I did this. I just feel like for those of us with that value foundation, there's just with what's going on, it's really not a place to uphold those values anymore. And so especially when it comes to socialization. So can I do this? All right, so there are over 1.5 million, with that number going up every day, that are parents that are homeschooling their children. So you're not like some weird freak that can't do it. Okay, you can do it. There are so many resources right now that you can do it where you wouldn't have been able to really have those resources before. And I will tell you about some of those too. So how will they do though? And maybe you're like, you know what, I just need to get through the next year and then we're going to transition back or something like that. So maybe you don't even care about this part. But if you're maybe looking at the long run of it, homeschool children tend to do better academically. Homeschool children on average tend to have higher standardized test scores. They persevere, that was a spelling mistake, my bad. Persevere through college longer and have higher GPAs in college. Those scores, let me tell you, were not statistically correlated with the parent's level of education. So my internet is unstable. I hope you guys can still see me and hear me. So what that means is they did not find that children who were being homeschooled by parents who had, you know, college degrees did any better statistically overall than children who were homeschooled by parents that didn't. So they actually did some more research and found that there was very little difference between the academic achievement of the homeschool students whose parents were teachers and those who were not. So even parents who are like, I'm a teacher, I can do this. Yes, you absolutely can. And so can anybody who is not a teacher, according to the research that they've done. So both types of students actually scored higher than their counterparts in public school. And with the available resources out there, you don't like have to know enough. So you're like, I don't know enough. You don't have to. Just as an example, last year and the year before, my high schoolers, they did classes through a co-op where they did chemistry and Spanish, and they've done ASL and things that I absolutely cannot teach them. And that's because there's so many awesome homeschool resources out there. There are online classes, there are other things. I have somebody who I connected with, and they're going to private tutor homeschool or ASL to my daughter for her 3rd year, since we couldn't find anywhere for her to do the 3rd year of it. So there's really cool things. You know, reach out to people who you know have skills in other areas or might be teaching things and stuff like that too. So there's a lot of options. What about those of you with special needs children? So one of my children is vaccine injured and on the spectrum, and we feel that he does better. He was never in a public school setting, and like I said, we started because my second was looking at an ADHD diagnosis, and we have found that we are much more able to guide and direct their learning according to their learning styles and according to their level, and keep it going for where they're at, so that they do thrive better and they aren't getting kind of left behind. Some people ask about, like, what if, you know, both parents are working, or I'm a single parent? There are definitely a lot of people who do that now more than ever. It obviously takes a lot of working around and things like that. And I'll share with you some resources coming up, and there on those resources, they have some really great things for parents in those situations too. So I will have that for you guys in a little bit. Let me just make sure I'm checking on my chat here. Yes, awesome, Taryn. So, okay, I wanted to cover patience because I think that, and if you homeschool, you've probably heard that before. Oh, that's great that you homeschool. I could never do it. I don't have enough patience. And I don't either. And I really didn't when we first started. So I've learned a lot since then. And I just kind of wanted to share with you guys a few of the things that I've learned since we started, and since I've actually had help from a really great therapist. So I have a friend who's a therapist, and I actually reached out to her with this too. I wanted to get her opinion on if there's something that I should be covering or I'm missing in this. And some of the things that I've learned from her have really helped me out in this area. So I wanted to share with you guys. And if somebody says, like, I just don't have enough patience to homeschool, to me, from what I've learned, that's the reason they should do it. Like, that's just all the more reason to do it, because one of the best gifts you can ever give your child, and the best subject you can teach them, is on this topic of patience and boundaries. And so we're going to talk about boundaries a little bit too. So if we think about it, in my experience anyway, impatience or being impatient is actually caused by a desire to control a child. And learning that we are not here to control them, but to guide them and to teach them, helps us move more towards giving them boundaries than trying to control them and being impatient with them. Another thing is remembering that when they're acting out, they are just handling emotions in the way that they know how, because they're having emotions and they don't know how to handle them in a healthy way. And so they're not doing it to us. And if we respond with an emotional reaction where we're not handling our emotions in a correct or a healthy way, then they're not going to learn how to either. And so those moments where we're feeling like triggered, impatient, or whatever by their behavior, those are really great opportunities for us as the parents to, instead of being triggered, to use those times to actually teach them in a healthy way how to work through their emotions. So we are, asking questions and getting to the root of their reality and what's behind it. So if a child is throwing a fit over a workbook, it's a really great time to just ask some questions and say, why is that bothering you? Does it make you feel angry? Are you just feeling frustrated? And letting them talk it out And it doesn't mean that we're allowing bad behavior either. And so that's the other side of it, where we're putting down boundaries and we're setting them ahead of time. If we didn't set a boundary there and they're throwing a fit over their workbook, we can still talk to them and we can get down to what's really going on and help them learn their emotions. One thing I learned about this is, as an adult, if you know anybody who you're like, what is wrong? Why did you act that way? And they go, I don't know. It's because they were never taught how to handle their emotions or how to identify the emotions that were behind their actions. And so if we can do that with our children, I learned this a few years ago, and I've been utilizing it with all of my kids, but my youngest, who's turning 7 tomorrow, the things that he comes up with and the things that he says, I am completely blown away with. He can identify emotions behind behaviors in himself that most adults can't even do. And it's really giving him an incredible foundation for being emotionally healthy and things like that when he's older. So it's been amazing. So look at those situations as opportunities to help them learn to work through emotions in a healthy way. Also showing them that you're there, that you're listening, you care about how they're feeling and what's wrong with them. And it doesn't mean you're consenting to bad behavior or allowing it, because that's where, maybe you put the boundaries down afterwards and you say, okay, I understand that was frustrating for you because of this. I just want you to know that it's okay to feel that way, but it's not okay to act that way anymore. And, if that happens again next time, here's maybe what the boundary is going to be for that. And one thing to remember is, okay, that's good. So one thing to remember is that boundaries are not meant to be control. It's not threats. So a boundary shouldn't be do this or else. That's not a boundary. That's a threat, and that's trying to control them. So boundaries are like fences, in a pasture, in a field, and they're just giving them, and they can climb over them. They can move out of them. And that's where the consequences come in. But boundaries are not threats. So yes. Did I see something? Did somebody want to say something? You can unmute yourself if you'd like to say something. You'll be recorded, just so you know, if that's okay. I'll have a time at the end of the class where I'll turn off the recording, and then if you want to ask questions then too, you can. But your questions are helpful to everybody, just so you know. So,
I can say something real quick. Sorry to interrupt. Hi, Sarah.
Hey.
This is actually Sarah, but my daughter's name is on here, Taryn, because she was doing church on Zoom. Oh. Sorry. And I didn't realize it until I was already logged in. So talking about the emotions with your 7-year-old, yes, mine calls them out too. She corrects me. I say, oh, you're really upset about this. Upset? I'm not upset. I'm angry. And I'm like, okay, you're angry. But also just saying the boundaries, and then the, well, I know you said threats. I'm not sure what else you said because there was noise in the kitchen. But I, sometimes I'll be trying to explain to my child something that we need to do or we should think about or whatever. And she's like, you're making a threat. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, I'm trying to guide you. And she's almost like too smart for me to like, and I don't want to argue with her. And so, anyways, yeah. So maybe if you can say just maybe a little more about that or do a post about it later or something. Yeah. That is very, yes, that's right where I need to learn some more. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. I like that. And actually, so, I know that for some parents too, they might go to the other end. So like, we're just trying to find some space in the middle, where it's like, we're not being completely boundaryless, but we're not being too boundary. But then at the same time, we're not like saying, we're not saying like, well, I don't want to say anything because I'm afraid of how my child's going to react. And so, as my therapist and I talk about that, which is actually kind of a form of codependency, where we're like, it doesn't really matter what my child's going to say. I have to be the parent. And so I know that some parents struggle on that end of it too. And so, just finding that ground in the middle and then working through their reactions to it. And there's sometimes where you literally just have to go like, you know what, we worked through your feelings as best as we could. Maybe, you know, you handle the rest on your own or whatever. If you need any more help, come to me. But, you know, and there's that point where you have to go, okay, well, you know, there's that, I'm the authority that God has placed over you, and I am who you need to respect. And, you know, I like hearing your feelings and I like talking about them. But we've got to work on the respect part of it too. So one thing I was also going to say too, and I will put, so I'm going to have all of these slides in a full blog post on my website, and I will put links to some of the things we're talking about today. So there are a couple of books that I wanted to share with you, and I forgot to get pictures up of them, but I will put links in the post for you guys. One of them is Boundaries. There's one, Boundaries with Kids, by Henry Cloud and Townsend, I think are the authors. That is a fabulous book. I highly recommend it. It's like one of your number one books if you're, well, any parent, but especially for starting your homeschooling journey. The other one my therapist just told me about that I wanted to throw on here too is a book called Parenting Scripts. So I will post a picture of it. It's called Parenting Scripts, and it really just like gives you everyday situations with kids. So like my kids are being tattletales, and so it gives you a script that's emotionally discussing it in a way that you're, you know, not just controlling them and helping them work through emotions and stuff like that. But it gives you the scripts of how to handle it, and also it has like prayer scripts with it too. So prayer that you can do with them in that situation and stuff like that too. So those are two books that I would say on this topic are really good. I think that the root of it all for having patience really comes down to being grounded in our own God-given worth as parents, that we don't need our children to be happy for us to be happy, and that we don't need their behavior to be good for us to be happy. You know, on my homeschooling journey, I had to let go of the results and be like, I'm just going to be faithful and with what I'm supposed to do. And if they, you know what, if like they go the wrong way or something, because I felt like everybody's watching me, I'm the only one in my family who's homeschooling, and you know, they're all watching to see how my kids are going to turn out. I got to try to control it, make sure that they turn out okay because everybody's watching. And it really worked counterintuitively, and it kind of backfired. So just really celebrating who they are and guiding their emotions, but also obviously not just allowing anything, and, you know, having those natural boundaries and consequences for that. It is hard when you're tired. It sure is hard when you're tired. And sometimes we just have to prioritize. And this is what I want you to understand and know, that you need to prioritize yourself, your mental health, your physical health, your emotional health. So there might be different things that you have to do when you homeschool that you didn't do before. And just be like, Mommy needs a timeout. I'm taking a nap. I'm taking time with my Bible. I'm taking time to read. You know what? If I have to plop you in front of the screen, that's what I'm going to do right now. I actually have a couple of resources for that too in just a bit that I'll tell you about. So the Whole Brain Child. I haven't heard of that one. I'd like to hear more. That sounds good. So one of the things that homeschooling will do is, it can do, is create a safe space, a safe place for children. And so that's my intention in sharing this about patience with you guys, is having that safe place for them. So boundaries are safe, and so they're worth learning about and doing. So the whole, oh, okay, I really got to check. I got to check on that. Thank you, Brainchild. I got to write that down. So allowing them that safe space for them to say how they feel, and, you know, explain those things and work through those emotions with you, and just not taking it personally. That's a hard one. That's a hard one, I think. But just remembering they're not doing it to us. Okay, so every state is going to be different when it comes to homeschooling. I can't give you what your state is going to be. I hardly know the ones I'm in. No, I do. So it's so different. Like when we were in Minnesota, we had to fill out a form every year, and you have to do it every year by a certain date. And in Minnesota, we actually had to do a vaccine exemption form, or if you do vaccinate, you have to send in what they have and stuff and things like that. So it depends on which state. And I'm going to give you guys a resource. Boundaries with Kids is free to read with Prime Reading on Kindle if a Prime member. Awesome. Thank you, Danielle. There you go. Free. That's an awesome resource. Free resources with homeschooling. I'm telling you, there are a lot of them. Thank you so much for that, Danielle. So I'm going to give you a resource coming up on where you can look up what your state's requirements are. And that may be changing. I know that they've been changing some of the state requirements based on with what everything is going on and stuff. But this resource is staying on top of that and things like that. Some states have like requirements for how many hours you educate, for testing. Like for Minnesota, you had to do an annual test, but you didn't have to submit the results and things like that. Where I'm at now, Oklahoma, you don't have to do anything, which is one reason why we moved here. Oklahoma is the only state in the United States that allows for homeschooling as written in their state's constitution. So that's one of my favorite things about Oklahoma. So I'll give you a resource for that. How much money and how much time? Basically, I just want to say how much money and how much time is up to you. Is completely up to you. These are averages, completely up to you. I'm going to talk to you about how I did it on a budget of 0 for a few years. So as far as the time goes, basically whatever they would be doing in public school is going to be like 1/4 to half of that amount of time, because it takes a lot less time when there's not a lot of distractions and when the teacher doesn't have to wait for the other kids to finish and when there's not this and when there's that. Children can get up and go to the bathroom when they need it, which I'm going to tell you from a health perspective is way more important than we've ever been told. Children's bodies need to be able to go to the bathroom when they feel it and not wait a half an hour. It's not healthy. So you don't have bathroom breaks. They just go and they come right back. So the time thing, if you're kind of like going into it for the first time and you're like, okay, well, they were in public school for 4 hours, so I got to carve out 4 hours. No, you do not. You absolutely do not. And it depends on which schooling method or learning method you choose. And we'll talk about that. But I just want you to know that this is up to you as the parent. So average cost, this is average. If you look at what public school students, what the cost is per student, like as far as how much tax money they take and stuff like that, it's you know, over $1,000 to thousands of dollars per student, per child. So it is way cheaper to homeschool, even though it costs us as parents, whereas if public school, it costs the community. So let's see here. Oh, one thing I want to tell you on the last one that I forgot. Be careful what forms you use when you are following the things you need to submit to your school district. If it's one by the school district, it's probably not good to use. There are organizations that you should be getting your forms from that have only what they legally need to know. If you get something in the mail from the school district, like when I first started homeschooling, I got this packet like this thick of pages that the public school said I had to fill out. And it was absolutely illegal for them to tell me that it was required. And so you only fill out what you have to fill out. And I'm going to tell you about some organizations to give you the proper paperwork. So do not fill out what the school district tells you is required. Okay. So the cheapest approach on average to homeschool a child is $50 to $100 per child per year. The most expensive is $500 or more. It's up to you. So in my experience, I've done it all different ways and been in different budgets before. We had a time where we had basically a budget of 0, and I totally made it work, and my children learned so much, and we had a lot of fun. I spent a lot of time. I had more time than I had money. Even though I had a lot of kids, I did still have time. So I spent a lot of time like writing out their lesson plans and planning out ahead of time what books and stuff. So we would use the library a lot. One thing I did was I would go onto websites like sunlight.com, and I'll tell you a little bit more about them in a little bit. And I would see for each grade, like what books were part of the curriculum for that year. And I would kind of like get out the lesson plan samples from their website and get started, get those for free. And then I would go to the library's website and I would just start like 2 weeks ahead of time, or a few weeks ahead of time before we needed those week's books. I would request them at the library and have them in. And so we were doing a lot of it that way. And then I was utilizing free resources for any workbook things that we needed, or I was actually just, if I would just pay for something, I would pay for those inexpensive workbooks for spelling or things like that. And doing a lot of it library-based, things like that. So the library was our best resource for doing things for free or for nothing, and used homeschool book sales. So a lot of homeschool co-ops will have a yearly or more often book sale on curriculum that other parents are done with. And so once you get in, like with the email subscriptions for other homeschool co-ops and stuff, you'll have access to that. So Texas has a homeschool coalition. They sent the withdrawal letter to the school for you. Other states hopefully have something similar. Wow, nice. New Jersey only requires you to fill out a transfer form if your children are already enrolled in school. Oh, okay. So I'm guessing that there is a homeschool co-op, or not co-op, a nonprofit organization in New Jersey, just like there's in Minnesota and stuff, that actually has the forms for you to use. So like in Minnesota, there were a couple of them. There was a Christian-based one, and there was a secular-based one, and they had forms for you. Actually, I'm going to give you a website too, though. HSLDA, which stands for Homeschool Legal Defense Association, they have forms. So if you, what's the word? I don't remember I can't even think of the word right now. But anyway, if you are a part of them, you can access their forms for every state for free. So once you like subscribe to them or something like that. So I'm going to tell you about them too. They're an amazing resource, and they have resources by state. So these are a few of the many learning styles. It's not just like all workbooks and textbooks when you homeschool. There are a lot of different things you can do, and you don't have to pick one of them. In my 16 years of homeschooling, I think we've done every single kind, and we still do almost every single kind in some way or another. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about them, and this should hopefully get you excited. When I first learned about them, it got me really excited about them, just knowing like all the different fun ways that you can learn together. And that's what homeschooling is. It's learning together with your children. It's not like I'm the teacher and I know everything and you're going to listen to me. It's we're learning together, and we're having an adventure of learning. And one of my favorite things about homeschooling is that if done right, it gives children a love for learning. And so when it's time for them to kind of learn something new in life or to research something, they're pros at it and they don't mind doing it at all. So there are some other learning styles on here that I didn't list, like online learning, eclectic learning, classical learning, Montessori, Waldorf. I won't get into all of them. I wanted to just kind of give a short rundown of some of these learning styles. So Unschooling is 100% student-led education based on their interests. So this is something that you might consider, especially if you have young children, preschoolers, kindergartners, where you're creating a learning environment that's led by their interests, and it really gets them excited about learning. This might be a good way to transition out of public school and saying like, we would do, so like if they were interested in something, if one of my children suddenly had a fascination for airplanes, we would go to the library and get a bunch of books on airplanes. We would learn for history. We would learn about famous pilots and things like that, and how the planes were, a part of certain wars and the role they played. And we might look at mechanical books about airplanes and things like that about them. Or, so that's just kind of an example of unschooling. There are some parts of unschooling that we never did it 100% because I still wanted them to do things like math, which isn't, usually student-led. Most children don't want to do math, and I feel that it's necessary, whether it's just, you know, small math blocks at the early ages or something more. So the Charlotte Mason approach is learning with real life situations with appropriate time to explore, create, also using living books. So this is really just using the world around us to learn. This is learning out in nature, just kind of things like that. So when you transition to homeschooling, you start learning that there are learning opportunities in everything. And so we might, you know, go out and encounter something and the kids are fascinated by it, and then we'll go online and we'll look up a YouTube video on that subject, and we'll look up this book on that subject, and we'll learn more about it from that real life setting and things like that. So it's a really fun way to do it. Yes, Charlotte Mason. And the people who do Charlotte Mason love it. And so that is especially good for when they're younger. In my experience, we did a lot of things that were really great for the kids when they were younger, but as they got older, I started to go, wow, I have to prepare them for like ACT tests and things like that or whatever. And so we started to get a little bit more serious and transition to some other things, but children learn best in those situations and they retain it better. So, you know, a child who goes out and actually sees and feels and touches that and then goes to learn about it a little bit more in a book is going to be more likely to retain it than they are if they'd just seen it in a book and that was it. So unit studies were one of my favorite when the kids were younger, with the younger kids especially. So as an example, we did a unit study called the Prairie Primer. And unit study is basically taking all of the subjects and making like that, those books or whatever it is you're learning with, be incorporated into every subject. Maybe not math. Again, math is like its own standalone category most of the time. But so for unit studies, we would like the Prairie Primer. One of my favorites. It's reading the Little House on the Prairie books, and there's a unit study workbook that goes with it. And so every week it would have it broken down like, here's today's reading. And so based on today's reading, here's what we're going to learn for science. And so there was a situation in the book where they encountered a bear. And so for science, we were learning about bears and hibernation. And for our Bible studies, there's a verse that goes along with obeying, because if Laura hadn't obeyed her mom, she would have gotten attacked by the bear. And so it's incorporating every subject into just this reading that you're doing together. And read aloud books together are amazing. So so yeah, there's different unit studies out there, and they just basically incorporate all of the subjects together. So for us, sometimes that was a really great option too on a budget, because we would just buy the unit study workbook and then get all of our books to go along with it from the library. So that was a really great option. Workbooks is just like the conventional schooling, but there are some children who learn better with workbooks. My oldest was this way. He didn't want to sit and take the time to listen to me, but he would just sit down and fly through a workbook and actually retain it and actually get it. So that again depends on the child. And literature-based, which can be some of these other ones too. Literature-based, like we do Sunlight for some of ours, and it's SONLIGHT. And that is just using a lot of historical fiction books, which I really love. I have things in history that I supposedly learned about in junior high myself and high school, and I don't remember anything. But then I start reading these historical fiction books with my children when they're teens and even younger, and I go, wow, that was fascinating. How come we didn't get taught it that way? It was so fascinating. So there are some really great award-winning books out there that are just great to just sit around with your family, with your kids, and read aloud. And some parents coming into homeschooling are like, my kid is not going to sit and listen to me read books out loud. That's the beauty of homeschooling. Eventually they will, and that's a part of it. So historical fiction, yes. And realizing how much we didn't learn. Oh my goodness, yes. So those are just some of the ways. And then when I first started homeschooling, I realized that you know, my child who had ADHD at the time, which we later found out was actually just a food response, was a kinesthetic learner. And so I started learning about how I could do learning based on their learning styles. So visual, auditory, and kinesthetic are the main ones. There are subcategories, and then there's multisensory. Well, most of us in some ways are multisensory, but we have a preferred or a main learning style. Visual are people who use images, colors, maps, charts. They usually excel in art. They like illustrated books and workbooks and puzzles. So for some of my kids, I've used some things, and this is really good for like Charlotte Mason learning and things like that. But actually the kinesthetic is too. But anyway, so like for instance, I've had some kids where I had a workbook that one kid really liked because it was colorful and it drew their attention in. And the next kid, they were like, can you not give me that workbook again? It was too busy for me. It just had too much stuff in it. And so I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I won't get that again. So that's kind of an example of where their learning style might be different and how it might affect how they're, you know, learning in that workbook or that class. So auditory learners do really well with music and verbal instruction. So they might be more likely to sit down and listen to a read aloud book together. Whereas with a visual one, they might need to see like workbook or coloring pages, like a kinesthetic learner might need to color a page or something along while you're reading it. So auditory learners do really well with phonics and song learning. So one of my favorite ways to teach my kids stuff, like if you've had something in school that you actually remember and it was because it was in a song, like 50 Nifty United States from 13 original colonies, you know, sometimes we remember things better in the form of a song. And so auditory learners especially do. There are a lot of really cool song curriculum things out there. I'm trying to think of, I'll put some in the blog post, some that we've really loved over the years to help them memorize geography. We have some really cool geography ones so they know all the continents of, you know, like the world and the oceans and stuff like that. I won't start singing those for you guys, but there's some really cool resources out there for that. So, so sometimes for some of my kids, they really have to, they're like kinesthetic where they have to have something that they're doing while we're reading aloud. And I think sometimes even teachers do this where they're thinking, it doesn't seem like the child is listening because they're totally consumed with something that they're coloring or drawing or the blocks that they're playing with while I'm reading, but they really are still hearing it. So kinesthetic learners, they're high activity, they're active learners. So they do better with large motor activities and math manipulatives, math blocks. They might need to do something with their hands while you're reading or something like that. So yes. And one of the math curriculums that we've used with my boys that have math blocks is called Matthew-C. It's actually, they've switched their curriculum since we've started and we've kept all of our old stuff because I prefer the old stuff. But in the beginning, it starts them out learning about ones, tens, hundreds with the blocks. And that helped some of my kids much better than the other ways that kids learn math. So, so I wanted to give you guys, well, where to go? Okay, these are some of my favorite resources for keeping younger kids busy. Like sometimes you just need to put them in front of the screen or something if you have to. I'm not going to shame anybody for doing that. But there are some really great educational apps out there and programs and things like that. We love Stack the State. So my kiddo who's 7 tomorrow, he learned how to identify every state of the United States by the time he was 3 from that app. He knew the states better than anybody in the home because of that app. There's some pretty cool ones out there. That's one of our favorites. And it actually, the Stack the States one can be a little bit tough. He managed to do it in some ways without knowing fully how to read. There's some things in there that they know how to read. So it actually is really good for the older grades too. So if you're switching to work with a younger one, or you still just need something for the older ones, like when I'm talking like elementary school still age, first, second, third grade, they still need something to do. I know that my, one of my kids, when he was 12, he was enjoying Stack the States as well and learning from it too. So it's a really great way. There's Stack the Countries too, so they can move up to the next level and learn about the countries. So preschool prep is one of my favorites. If you have a little one, even if they're not even 2, and you need something for them to do, preschool prep taught my youngest 2 to read after the other curriculum we used with the other kids was not working very well. We didn't even start it with my youngest, and he picked up on reading really quickly at a really young age from preschool prep. Preschool prep has videos, DVDs. You can download videos, I think, too, after you purchase them. They have workbooks to go along with them. They have flashcards. So we did the videos, and when we were working one-on-one with some of the other kids, we would let him watch a preschool prep video. He would learn how to read, and then on our one-on-one time with him, we would do the flashcards just to make sure that he was getting it and everything. Then we moved up to the workbooks and stuff like that. So I love that program. I can't say enough about it. Hopefully it stays the way that it is. I don't know. You know, I feel like if I say something that I like someday, then it's just going to switch on me, and I don't know. So that's how it is now. And then sensory bins. So when, let's see here, what do I have? When my kids were really young, when I had toddlers around, I made a lot of like sensory bins for them, and I would even put them like Monday, Tuesday, label them for each day of the week. And just something to keep them busy. There are a ton of sensory bin ideas online. You can go on Pinterest, you can go online, find lots of sensory bin ideas, and they have a lot of fun with them too. So that's a really great way to keep toddlers busy and learning too. Okay, so I wanted to go into some health support, because when my second one was having problems that, you know, doctors would have called ADHD, we did some research and we discovered that he was actually just having a reaction to food dyes. So we experimented with a little bit. We cut out all food dyes and we let him have them after not having them for a long time. And that one time we went to a birthday party, we let him have the birthday cake there. And within minutes of him having the cake, it came back. He had this like emotional response to it where like his eyes glazed over and he was just extremely emotional and like almost like emotionally possessed. And it was a flashback to all of the times he had had that situation when we were allowing food dyes in his diet every day and thinking he was just an overly emotional child. And it was just a reaction to food dyes on his brain. And so we cut them out completely, and he was a lot easier to deal with emotionally all of the time. So these tips, especially things like this, are going to make your job easier as well. And then watching the refined sugars and gluten, there's the gut-brain connection. So if you haven't learned about the gut-brain connection, it's worth researching. You know, a lot of times the emotional issues go back to their gut health. And so really supporting their gut health by, you know, eliminating refined sugars and sometimes eliminating gluten, if you can, it can really do wonders in their emotional health and their behavior, especially their behavior too. So they actually did some research on kids, and they found out that when they gave them excess calories in the form of sugars, they were a lot more jittery and they couldn't sit still and things like that, which of course we're like, yeah, well, it makes sense. So again, another way to make your job easier by supporting them, their health and nutritionally and things like that. So that's also why I listed probiotics on here. The gut-brain connection is very strong. They're going to be more likely to have better behavior, better emotions, and better learning with guts, you know, supporting their gut health every day. And then let's see here, omegas for brain health. So I put omegas on there for brain health because you can really support their learning by supporting their brain with good brain fats. So I will talk about some of those that I use, and then aromatherapy, I'm going to share with you what we use for that too. So I put up a few things on here because I know people like screenshots. And so I did this so you could do a screenshot if you want to. I'm going to share with you some studies on these things. So omegas, this is what we use. MindWise is a non-fish brain supporting omega liquid, and it actually tastes delicious. So if you're like, I'm never going to get cod liver oil in my kid, MindWise is delicious. There's individual sachets too that they can just drink, but we buy the big bottle, and they like it that way. So cod liver oil is another way they can do it. You know, you can hide the taste, you can just get them used to it, whatever it is. The younger you start, the more likely they'll just keep taking it without problems as they get older. Probiotics, this is one that we use. I have one on my healthyfamiliesforgod.com website too. That's a children's chewable probiotic. And this is Mighty Pro. That's packets that they just go like that, like Pixie packet thingies, you know. And that one actually also has a prebiotic in it, which helps feed the good bacteria in the gut. And then, so Genius is an oil that I use a lot. It's probably the one I use the most for homeschooling. I diffuse it all the time when we're homeschooling. It's a blend of oils that are really great for just boosting their clarity in their brain and oxygenating it and things like that. But I'm going to tell you about some studies on some of these individual oils that I thought were really interesting. So they did some research. There's a lot of research that's been done on lemon oil. And one research in particular found that inhalation by workers caused them to make 54% fewer errors. So they cut the errors that they were making in half, more than in half, just by having them inhale lemon.
Yeah.
And so let's see, frankincense. Let me do a frankincense one. Frankincense in a 2011 study, I can't even read my own writing. I like to do it the old-fashioned way. So I'm just gonna make sure we're all muted so I can. So a 2011 study shared a link between frankincense essential oil and improved spatial memory retention. So it's helping them retain more of what they're learning. Rosemary is really fascinating. So in Shakespeare's Hamlet, there's actually a thing in there that says there's rosemary. That's for remembrance. It's been known historically for a long time that rosemary helps the brain. A 2016 study found that students who worked in a room with rosemary essential oil in the air scored 5 to 7% higher on memory tests. That was pretty cool. And rosemary actually has a lot of research behind it too for calming the emotions, not like making you tired calming, but like calming the emotions. So I've used it a lot for that. And another study on peppermint. So a 2018 study, I should have a dietary one. So this was a dietary use of peppermint capsules. So we have a dietary one that we use as well. It was associated with improved performance of demanding cognitive tasks. So there's some pretty cool research out there. And I will say, yes, putting rosemary in a roller, you can diffuse them. You can put them in rollers. Sometimes we will put them right here where they will breathe it in. And sometimes we'll put them right on the crown of their head. And also sometimes right on the base of their skull right here. So that's how we do that. Otherwise we diffuse them. I will say that in the last 6-7 years, whenever I share something about things like this, I will get a lot of messages over the next couple of months like, you told me to use this oil and this really bad thing happened. And what happens is they went to their grocery store and they bought a cheap oil and it wasn't what it says it is. And so I just want to issue the disclaimer that I am not making any claims for any brand other than Young Living, because I don't want to see your child get a rash Or have you experienced something where you're like, that didn't do anything and I spent $10 on that bottle at the grocery store and it didn't work at all? Quality is everything here. So just to issue that disclaimer, and that's what cedar wood is a good one too. Yes. So there are a lot of good ones out there. Cedar wood is really high in a constituent called sesquiterpenes, which is very oxygenating to the brain. So these are some really cool tools to have on hand at your disposal and using all of the time for, yes, don't buy the grocery store oils. For homeschooling, it's going to make your job easier. It's going to help calm your emotions. It's going to help calm their emotions. There's actually, forgot what I was going to say, vetiver. If you go do research on vetiver oil too, vetiver, that's a really good one too, for especially for like my second kiddo who we thought had some, you know, behavioral things and stuff. But anyway, so that is that. These are some of the resources I was talking to you about tonight. I'm going to be putting links for these in the blog that I do, but these are basically like hslda.com is going to be your first resource that I highly recommend. I highly recommend paying the, I don't know, it's like $10 a month or something to be a part of their organization. Homeschool Legal Defense Association is basically like, they have a lot of resources for you, but also if you ever have a situation that needs an attorney, like a homeschooling situation, they will be right there for you. So I've had maybe 2 situations in the past 16 years, and they were right there on top of it, helping me with the situation. And so it's really cool to have them as your backup right on your side like that. And you can, once you have like subscribe to them or whatever, you can log in and it'll give you all of the resources for your state. So the forms that you should have for your state, as you know, created by attorneys. So it's nothing more than you need to give, but it fills the requirements for what you do need to give and things like that. So diffuse, awesome, excellent. So HSLDA is fabulous. They also have some resources for single parents and households where both parents are working, and they have all these resources. I mean, you could go over there and spend hours on there after this. So just keep that one in the forefront of your mind, first of all. Christianbook.com is where I buy almost all of our curriculum when I'm buying it new. As far as like workbooks go and master books. So underneath that, I put master books. Master books is a favorite for Christian families because it's not going to be propaganda like some of the curriculum is that's not faith-based. It's colorful and things like that. So master books is worth checking out, and you can get them in a variety of places, but christianbook.com is one place where you can get them. Sunlight is one of the things that I've loved over the years. It's not necessarily all faith-based books. So for me personally, I've thumbed through them, I've read through them, I've researched the books before they read them when they're younger. When they're older, I give them to them. If I feel like they will be a discerning student, and I will say, like, tell me how this goes as you're reading it. And my, you know, my daughter, who's a very wise, guarded, discerning girl, she'd say, Mom, you know, this one's kind of this, what do you think? And I'm like, yeah, I think you can skip that one or whatever. So it gives them a good experience in learning to be discerning in what they're exposed to and things like that too, as they get older. But when they get younger, yeah, no, I don't do that. There's been some books that are part of the curriculum for Sunlight that have really rocked my family's world, that have really had some great learning experiences, books that we talk about forever and ever and ever. So it's worth checking out their website and seeing some of those books. I'll put some of my favorites in the blog post too, just for some chapter books if you want to look at them. Christian book, if you look on, I think it's called Honey for Your Child's Heart. And these are books that you can, it basically lists all of the common books, historical fiction, any books that are out there right now, really, like classic ones and modern ones, and it will kind of give you a review on them. Like, do you think this is good? It might have these things in it and stuff. So I think it's called Honey for Your Child's Heart, but I'd have to double check. That's a good one to just kind of say, like, I'm going to look up this book and see if we should read it or not, if you don't have time or don't want to read them ahead of time. I will say, when I did have time, I loved reading the books with them or ahead of them. They're just amazing reads. So Sunlight's that. And then, of course, local libraries. I don't know how that's going to change lately. You might just have to do the online ordering or reserving and picking up until you can go in. But going into libraries was a big part of homeschooling for us until this last year. And it was just a really cool part. We did it all the time. The kids enjoyed it. They loved it. They loved getting new books. And I love that they were excited about books. So those are the resources I have for you. And I, again, will put this into a blog post and share with you guys what, you know, some of the links are and things like that. So if you, you know, just hang in there. I will have that ready for you guys. Probably it'll take me a while. I'll just be honest with you. We're starting our planning for our next year and listing out our curriculum and things like that. But if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. I just hope that you feel better about it, that you're excited about it, because it's really an exciting journey. And maybe you're like, I just need to get through the next year. Maybe you do, and maybe you find out that you love it. That's what happened to me. And maybe you don't, and that's okay too. So I just pray the best on your guys' journey, and I'm here if you have any questions. Even if it takes me a while to get back to you, I will. So thank you for joining me.